Hi, I'm Nick Haig, and welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. Asheesh Advani is the global CEO of JA Worldwide. An NGO has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize several times and reaches 10 million youths every year, preparing them for employment and entrepreneurship. Asheesh is also an accomplished entrepreneur, having led 2 venture-backed businesses from startup to acquisition. He's an in-demand speaker and regular contributor at major conferences, having served as a panelist and moderator at the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. His new book, Modern Achievement with Marshall Goldsmith, was released in August and is already an international bestseller in the US, UK and India. Welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, Asheesh.
It's great to be here.
Well, I'm delighted that you're on. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for writing such a fabulous book. As the host of this podcast, I do get sent many books to read, but this is definitely up there as one of my favourites. So thank you to you. Thank you to Urs Koenig as well, who put us in touch with one another. Do you know Urs well?
I know Urs. I've gotten to know him really well, and he's just been such a generous person. And so I'm really grateful he put us in touch, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into the book, it's important as the backstory to hear about your childhood, as you were born in Mumbai, India, but immigrated to Toronto, Canada, just before your 6th birthday. And this had a profound effect on you, didn't it, with you developing a severe stutter? Can I pass the story over to you at this point for you to talk the listeners through these early years and how you overcame these hurdles to then attend UTS and Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania?
Sure. Yeah. I moved from India to Canada when I was 6, and we don't know why I developed the stutter. You probably won't hear it now because it's been several years and I've been able to, with the benefit of speech therapy growing up, really improve my speaking. And maybe I just outgrew it as well. People really don't know with stuttering how it happens and why people stop stuttering. But in my case, when we moved to Canada, to Toronto, immediately almost when we moved, I started to not be able to say things. And there are different types of stutters. I had the type of stutter where I'd open my mouth and nothing would come out, as opposed to ones where you have lots of quick repetitions. So it was actually very embarrassing. You can imagine just being able to even talk to friends was a problem.
Yeah.
And there, as I look back upon that experience, the speech therapy I had, I went to speech therapy every Wednesday after school. I became a better public speaker because of the practice that we did in the speech therapy. So we'd get exercises such as like, please talk about hockey for a minute, or talk about random topics like buttons for 30 seconds and do it without stuttering. So I would have to practice what's called easy onset, which is starting sentences with a breath and getting that breath to be able to say that first sound. People who stutter actually know they're about to stumble on a word before it happens. So they become very good at changing words. It's one of the things I think most people don't know about stutterers is they become very good at finding synonyms or different ways to say the same thing.
Right.
And speech therapy really taught me not only how to become better at public speaking, but how to be able to be good at extemporaneous speaking, because I could change words very quickly in my head to come up with new ways to express things.
Yeah.
So now in retrospect, as I look back upon the stuttering experience, I guess I choose to remember the positive that came out of it, which is I became very good at extemporaneous speaking, as opposed to the negative, which is, between the ages of 6 and 18, I really had a very difficult time with even basic things like speaking in front of the classroom or having leadership roles and things which I think young people really love to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I can imagine. And I think it's just such a great scene setter for a lot of the topics that we're going to talk through today about needing to overcome hurdles, being adaptable to change, and especially in this modern world. And I think in your career as well, in the book, you've been many things, from starting with a door-to-door salesman, an associate for a strategy consulting firm, banker, you've worked for the World Bank, you've started an investment firm in India, lectured at universities and created Circle Lending. And this was all before you were 30 years old. So as your life has evolved over these years. Did you have a grand plan of how your career would be laid out, or did it happen by chance?
Well, I think most people approach things with at least some kind of plan. But of course, planning, particularly in the world of today, is very challenging. In the world of yesterday, I think it was still challenging. But now, a young person who's graduating is going to have at least 20 jobs on average and at least 7 careers on average, if you believe some of the research that comes out of the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. But even if you don't necessarily believe in that research, you have to sort of step back and say the world is changing so fast. AI is going to replace or require us to reskill the majority of our skills every 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So there's going to be this need for people to change jobs and change careers. Yeah. And I had that experience just by circumstance in my life. And sure, I may have had a plan, and sure, I had some goals and dreams. But as I look back upon my life, now I'm running this great organization. I certainly didn't say at the age of 18 or 25, when I'm older, I'm going to run a large nonprofit organization that's international. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't that intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and at my previous career, I was a market researcher, founded and headed a market research company for 25 years. I mean, who the hell says they want to be a career market researcher when they're at school? And, here I am now as a podcaster, and that even didn't exist as a job title when I was at school. I think in your book, you talk about 60% of future jobs haven't been created yet. So, you need to be adaptable in this modern world. It's not the same world that we're now living in. And you're now CEO at JA Worldwide, Junior Achievement Worldwide. And I do need to plead my ignorance that I didn't know much about JA Worldwide until we were connected. But doing my homework, reading into it, it's an amazing organization. Been in existence for over 100 years, helps over 15 million students in over 100 countries every year. Can you tell us a bit more about JA Worldwide and your role there?
Sure. In fact, one of the reasons I wrote the book was to have the opportunity to talk about the organization, because it's just so great. And you're right, a lot of people don't know about it, even though we've been in existence for a long time and had some great accolades. So we reach young people at the time of their life where they're deciding who they are and who they want to become. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful parts of our organization. And we reach young people at scale. So we reach over 15 million young people per year around the world. And we do it typically in partnership with schools and school systems. So you're in the UK, and our brand in the UK is Young Enterprise. So we're a global network of nationally branded organizations. In most cases, in over 90% of cases, the brand is Junior Achievement Kenya, Junior Achievement Canada, etc. But in some countries, our brand is different. For example, in the Middle East, the translation of achievement in Arabic is Injaz. So our brand is Injaz. So Injaz Saudi and Injaz Qatar, for example. And in the UK, our brand is Young Enterprise, partly because the organization for many years actually was a partnership between Young Enterprise and Junior Achievement as it launched in Western Europe. Right. When the Berlin Wall came down, many of the countries in Eastern Europe joined our organization and were branded Junior Achievement. So there's Junior Achievement Romania, Junior Achievement Estonia, and all these amazing organizations at the national level have built partnerships with school systems. And that allows us to have time in the school day to reach young people. We teach financial literacy skills, we teach entrepreneurship skills, and we teach work readiness skills. And through a combination of those three things, young people develop a sense of self-confidence, and they start to think of themselves differently, and they start to think of their career options differently. Because often we're the first time a young person has even heard of the idea of working in business or meeting a role model, a mentor, a volunteer who comes into the classroom almost like a career day and talks about their career and introduces young people to careers they didn't know even existed. So I think one of the great things about our organization is we have this amazing ability to reach young people at scale right at the time of their life where they're deciding what they can become.
Yeah. And that's what I really loved about it. Like you say, it's about readiness to walk into the world, whether it's about business, economics, future of work, this experiential learning. And I think schools are outdated in a way in terms of how they teach at the moment and the topics that they teach. I've still got a son at high school, and they've opened up the curriculum to business studies, so he's taking that. But the rest of it, it feels a bit antiquated, and so I really think it's so worthwhile, as you say, and empowering people, giving back, recognised as by Fast Company one of the top 100 best workplaces for innovators, and the only non-profit to make the list, and you're alongside the likes of Microsoft and Google, so you're in good company there, aren't you, Asheesh?
Well, listen, working with educators in schools gives us the opportunity, because they have a very difficult job. I mean, changing curriculum in some of these institutions takes a long time.
Yeah.
They have many stakeholders, of course. We can move faster. We can be more responsive. We have partnerships with over 70% of the Fortune 200 companies in the world. So we have a pulse on what the job market is and where it's headed, at least for some of the larger employers. And in some of the local entities and chapters, they've got great partnerships with local companies as well. Yeah. So because we're so connected to both education and the employment sector, we can move faster than I think other groups of people to make sure that young people are learning the skills and the mindset, not just the skill set, but the mindset to be able to thrive in the job market of the future.
Yeah, yeah. And young people are the future. And I think moving on to that, we've talked about your background, therefore, and where you are today, and your career steps that led you to where you are. And it's not this traditional linear progression that some authors of business books might have us believe. But in order to achieve our career goals, sometimes we need to be a bit more adaptable. And in this world that's more unpredictable than ever, we need to be more adaptable to change as new technologies you've mentioned continues to put curveballs in the way of our goals. So the book that you can see behind me, your new book titled Modern Achievement, you've co-written it with Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 coach in the world. Can you give us some background about how this collaboration came together and the reason why you think this book is so important for the world we now live in?
Well, Marshall's become a mentor to me, and he's reached the point of his own life where he's all about giving back. So his motivation is completely about sharing his knowledge, his wisdom, his network, his amazingness with the world. And so he basically lent his time and his brand and his following to me and to Junior Achievement to help us amplify the messages that we both have for young people and really for aspiring leaders. Yeah. The specific moment it happened was we were at dinner together just after the pandemic. And JA Worldwide that year had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the first time in our history. So it was a really big honor for our organization. And Marshall and another a generous person named Mark Thompson organized this celebratory dinner. And Marshall, in front of everyone, really said, Asheesh, we should do something like this type of big project together to really help young people. And in front of everyone, we high-fived. And I've got to tell you, high-fiving in front of your friends in a social network has more enforceability than any contract you can ever sign with anyone. Yeah. That's the one thing I've learned. And so when we did that, we basically committed to each other and to our friends and community that we would work on this project together. And that led us to think about how to make it really helpful. And the book is written to be very practical. This is not at all an academic tome. It's filled with stories. It's filled with lessons. Each lesson is short and digestible. One of one of the readers of the book let me know last week that he is listening to a chapter in Audible in the car with his son, because every chapter is so short. It's like a 10-minute segment while they're driving from place to place. Yeah. So he can talk about it with his son. I thought that was really a great example of how a book like this could actually be useful for changing hearts and minds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So, and well, I've mentioned it before, but it really is dog-eared, my book there. It keeps bounding open. And from reading your book, your wife, I know, doesn't like people to fold the page even. So I'm not going to be in the best books there, but I needed to in order to, do the heavy reading that I needed to. But it's not heavy, as you say. You can pick it up, put it down. You can go to the back of the book, the middle of the book. You don't need to do it in sequential order. It's a fabulous read. The book itself, it's called Modern Achievement, but it's centered around a framework that you call fixed, flexible, and freestyle. Can you tell us more about this framework and how it's applied to career achievement?
Sure. Well, if you're going to have multiple jobs and multiple careers in your life, you need to be adaptable. Most achievement books are written about long-term goal setting.
Yeah.
You develop this long-term goal, you write it down, you visualize it, and the universe helps you achieve that goal. That advice is great, but for a world with this much change, you need to have a framework for how you think about long-term goals, short-term goals, multiple goals, pivoting, being able to be responsive to not only new information and new trends, but also how you yourself change over the course of your career. So we've got a framework. That framework we've actually introduced at Junior Achievement for the way we run our organization. So it allows for this adaptability and change. There's some things that are globally fixed at Junior Achievement, many things that are regionally flexible, that vary based on place and time. And most things are freestyle. Freestyle means really customized, really focused on the individual or local needs. Similarly, for individuals, when you talk about lessons or rules or things that you want people to follow, advice, there's some things that really are foundational, fixed, that don't change.
Yeah.
There are many things that do change based on time and place, where you are in your life, what kind of career you have or where you live. And then most things are freestyle. They're things which are unique to you and your strengths. And so this framework allows us to be very adaptable to the change around us and the change within us. And that's why it's a very powerful framework.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the book, you talk about, how it can be applied to your career, but you also talk about how this framework can be used individually to allow you to grow as a person individually. Again, can you expand on how this is used an example? I think that would be good to bring it to life.
Sure. I mean, a good example is when you're designing the career that you love, right? You have to look at your individual needs. You've got to look at where you are in the world and where you are in your career. And you also have to rely on some really fixed things which aren't changing. One of the fixed lessons is go meta.
Yeah.
Okay. What go meta means is that learning these days, particularly with this much change, needs a moment where you step back and you almost look at yourself like you're floating in the room above yourself. So you're looking down at yourself learning. And schools now do this. Schools actually do meta learning. So when we were in school, we didn't have this. But most school systems these days require at the end of a lecture, lesson, or a unit to take a moment to reflect on what you've actually learned. And students actually write down now, this is what I learned today, or this is what I learned in this unit. That moment of reflection is, in my mind, a fixed principle, something that should always be true. If we're going to change jobs and change careers, we need to take a moment to step back and figure out how we've changed and how we're going to advance to the next stage of our life. So that's an example of fixed. I've got examples of flexible and freestyle too, but I wanted to give you an example of what, at least in my mind, is foundational.
Yeah. Yeah. And because it's the three, it's all about balancing these three dimensions, isn't it? Overweight one or two of them, you become unsteady. So it's been making sure that you've got that fixed, flexible and freestyle nature within your personal life as well as your career as well. What I love about the book is that it's rooted in your personal experiences and learnings from life's journey, whether it's what's happened in the past with yourself, Marshall as well, but there's so many other contributors as well from leaders as well as people from JA Worldwide as well. And each of the sections are split into two subdivisions: self and career, lessons on how a different approach can support one's personal development and one's career. And in this way, the book is really, really practical. Great reference book, whether you're a mentor or a mentee. Was that one of the reasons, you've mentioned Marshall was a mentor to you. So was that one of the reasons behind writing a book like this?
Yeah, I mean, Marshall has written many books. Almost all of his books are bestsellers.
Yeah.
And most of his books are not written for young people. In fact, none of his books are written for young people. They're written for established leaders. So part of the motivation for this book is to take the best of his wisdom that does translate well for a younger audience, the best of not only my experiences, but the people I've met, because I have this amazing privilege, really, to be able to travel the world and meet the most achievement-oriented young people. So that allowed me to draw from their experiences. One of the lessons in the book from a young person I met is to make friends 5 to 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
So simple, so concrete. Most people just don't think about it. In fact, even my kids who are, in university, and I think you said your son's in high school, right?
One of them's at university at William.
Okay. Well, at the ages they're at, I'm guessing they aren't at all thinking intentionally about making friends 5 to 10 years older than them. That's just not what they're thinking about. They're thinking of the people that they hang out with, their peers. But the networking value, the role model value, the mentorship value that comes from making friends 5 to 10 years older than you is not only valuable, but invaluable for what's coming in the future, which is this much change. The example the young person I mentioned told me is how he found his job. He's now in Dubai. He moved from the US to Dubai, actually spent time in London and India as well. But he got that job because he made friends 5 to 10 years older than him.
Yeah.
And what we would normally have thought is he'd get the job from applying for it or from his network from his college or whatever it might be. But now the benefit of actually being intentional about these role models, mentors, and friends in your network, I thought was a great lesson. In fact, it's a good story. I put the lesson in, and then we, of course, shared a draft of the book with lots of people to get some feedback. And we got some great feedback, which is this lesson also applies to people later in their career.
Yeah.
And so we changed the lesson to say also make friends with people 5 to 10 years younger than you. And I've started to do that. I've also started to realize there's so much value. Sometimes it's called reverse mentoring, but you actually are intentional about really spending time with people younger than you, because with this job market, you need to really expand your network.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that. Actually, on this podcast show, I spoke with Chip Connolly on a previous episode, and his time in the early days of Airbnb, and he was approached by CEO Brian Chesky to help grow their promising tech startup. He was brought in for his knowledge on the hospitality industry, even though he knew nothing about tech whatsoever. And soon after joining, he talks about being an in-house mentor, but it was a two-way street. He was giving advice based on his years of experience, but he was receiving just as much back from the young tech-savvy team he was working with. And as you say, this reverse mentoring was so rewarding. But the key is to find the people who push you, want to learn different things. And so, don't be afraid to ask to be mentored. That's one of the learnings for sure. I think, what in your eyes, what does make a good mentor?
Well, first of all, I think you said it right. Don't be afraid to ask. I would say most people know there's value in mentoring or being mentored, but most people are still afraid to ask. And one reason they're afraid to ask is they think the answer is going to be no, or they think they're asking the other person for such a significant favor, it feels like they're overreaching.
Yeah.
But in reality, at least in my experience, people don't mind being asked. People actually feel flattered when they're asked.
Absolutely.
And the worst that can happen is they say no. And what they'll usually say is, call me back in 6 months, I might have more time, as opposed to no.
Yeah.
So I encourage young people particularly, but really any listener, anyone who wants to basically be better and is an aspiring leader who wants to invest in their personal development, there's so much value. And I'll give you an example. So I asked a senior executive if I could spend the day job shadowing him so I could learn from him. Such a simple ask. He didn't have to change his behavior too much. I just followed him around for a day. This was before the pandemic, so this was when everyone was still going to the office, so it was a little bit easier. But still, even in today's world where people spend a lot of time on Zoom calls, you can still create a sense of creating a job shadow experience. It's not quite the same as mentoring, but he became a mentor because of the job shadowing experience. And I learned so much from that one day. I still talk about it. I still reflect on even Fixed Flexible Freestyle came from that one day of mentoring.
Right.
So I feel pretty strongly, and we do this at JA, of course, and have been for many years, allowing young people to mentor or to be mentored by doing a job shadow exposes them to a career and behaviors that they didn't know exist from their parents. Because most people only know what their parents and parents' friends and social network do. Yeah. Getting out of that bubble and actually spending time with somebody who's got a career that you're interested in or has a life that you're interested in usually people are going to say yes. All you have to do is ask.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, actually. For 25 years, set up the company, grew it globally, sold out. My wife still hasn't a clue what I did on a day-to-day basis as a market researcher. So, yeah, those that are nearest and dearest to you, is good to job share. You do learn a lot. B2B Frameworks is a curated collection of proven business frameworks to develop your strategic thinking skills, solve your biggest business problems, and unlock your next promotion. Our mission is to help you achieve these goals. We want to create the next generation of successful business leaders by providing the tools and frameworks needed to create effective strategies that drive business growth. Each framework comes with a downloadable set of instructions with large, colourful diagrams and editable templates to guide you through the process step by step and prompt you to consider the problem from every possible angle. Along with audio guides and educational tools, our extensive content library is full of real-world examples and case studies of strategic thinking in action. So why learn with B2B Frameworks? We've carefully curated only the most effective, proven business and marketing frameworks. Our downloadable materials and audio guides will help you easily apply each framework. And the insights and advice you'll find across the site are based on 30 years of consulting experience from one of the world's leading business strategy experts, Paul Haig. B2B Frameworks is a small investment to advance your career or grow your business. Start your journey to becoming a successful business leader by joining B2B Frameworks today. The book itself is divided into 3 sections covering the framework itself. So if we start with fixed, this covers the foundations that you've said. It's the knowledge of leadership and leading that are viewed as fixed lessons because they just don't change, even if the world around us does. And you reference in this section many leaders like Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, Peter Drucker. So many topics could cover, but in what in each section I've picked, well, you mentioned it before, actually, Go Meta, because this stuck out to me because not only of what it means, but also the framework that's aligned with Go Meta, the Wheel of Change. Can you explain to our listeners a bit more about Go Meta? I know you touched on it before and some background to the Wheel of Change framework.
Sure. So what we did with each of the sections for fixed, we had a series of lessons, about 10 lessons. And for each lesson, we decided to really lean into the classic literature on achievement. So people who read the book actually get a little snippet from some of the classics as well. That way you don't have to go read, many books that you otherwise would maybe have not aged well as the world has changed, but yet still have great wisdom in the books. So Dale Carnegie's book, right, How to Win Friends and Influence People, amazing lessons. Dale Carnegie is really one of the thought leaders, I would say, going back years and years on personal development.
Yeah.
So to be able to include, some of his lessons and thoughts in the book, I think was really important. But Go Meta, just to make sure I really touch on that. School systems these days have realized that without this moment of stepping back and being intentional and conscious about what you've learned, a lot of young people just skate right by it and don't actually reflect. And so that's why we believe that is something which is a new, genuine, fixed lesson. It's not something which you'll find in most classic books, but we added it because we believe it is a genuine change in the way learning theory and learning practice happens.
Yeah.
The Wheel of Change is wonderful. It's it's Marshall Goldsmith's tool, and I won't do it justice describing it here, but the quick version of it is most people are too ambitious about trying to change their behavior and they fail. They don't get their New Year's resolutions done. They don't get their goals accomplished because they're too ambitious into thinking they can drive behavioral change in their life very quickly, within a month or within a year. What the Wheel of Change does is it allows you, it's a neat little framework, it's very clever, which allows you to figure out what you're going to stop doing, what you're going to continue doing, what you're going to preserve, what you're going to create. And it's a quick and easy way to be better at creating behavioral change for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fantastic framework. And for the podcast on the YouTube, if you're watching, we'll when this goes live, we'll put the framework up there so you can get a feel of what we're talking about, these two axes, and how you around that you can become the person that you want to be becoming. But yeah, I think again, it's all around to understanding that self-improvement, understanding what matters to you most, where you want to go, but you can't be everything to everyone, of course, and so deciding on what you're going to accept and preserve as well. Next is the section called Flexible, and in this part of the book you talk about how one should adapt a flexible approach to decision making, perspective taking, resiliency, and the stories in the book really do bring it to life. For instance, in this chapter I've chosen, Don't Let Feedback Get in the Way of Your Success. I think it's an excellent example of how you can't always take things to heart when receiving feedback. Do you want to expand on this, Asheesh, on how you personally used to muddle feedback with emotions and taking it too personally then led to negativity?
Well, so everyone, when they receive feedback initially early in their career, react to it differently. And I see this in people who I give feedback to in my organization. I see this in all the jobs I've had, and I see this with the young people who I interact with in various settings. In my case, I tell the story of how the first time I received very pointed negative feedback about some assignment that I had in one of my first jobs. The person who delivered it to me, I don't think this was his intention, but the way I heard it was almost like, it felt like a personal attack on the quality of my work and effort. And I spent the entire time brooding on the fact that the person didn't understand why I did it the way I did, and I didn't get a chance to explain it. So he just gave me this very negative feedback and made me very defensive, made me question my own skills. As I reflected on that day, I thought, geez, maybe I'm just not good at this at all. I did this entire assignment not the way I should have. When in reality, feedback should be received and it should be delivered in a way in which the motivations are very pure, right? You're actually helping the person improve, and the person who hears it should really just say thank you. Right? It's just one person's opinion. It's not a judgment on who you are or on your own sort of skills and abilities and strengths and weaknesses. It really is much more about one person's opinion about a particular task or project. And Marshall really has educated me about this. When you hear feedback from anyone, the best thing to do is just to say thank you. That's it. Now, if you're delivering feedback, if you're the person delivering feedback, the way you deliver it matters a lot. So you can say, hey, you did this thing wrong. I'm going to give you a poor evaluation score. Right? That's the worst.
Yeah.
Or you can say, I really see a lot of potential in you and I want to help you succeed. And so here's something I'm telling you that will help you succeed. Totally different way to say the same thing. And I think the phrasing, and some people are really good at it. I don't even think I'm actually great at it. But I've been with managers and peers and friends and colleagues and leaders, and I've seen how the best are able to do it. There's this wonderful actually tool, or I guess it's a process called Say It Skillfully.
Right.
There's a wonderful sort of expert on this. You can Google it on LinkedIn. Her name's Molly, and Molly does such a good job of helping people say things better. And it makes such a difference in life, particularly when it comes to feedback, in how you deliver it and, of course, how you receive it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's gold throughout the whole book, as I keep saying, Asheesh. And I think, to Marshall's point, he says, feedback is a gift. It gives us this insight, doesn't it, to act differently in the future. And I really like in that same chapter, actually, he talks about the particular example about not receiving feedback, but framing it as feed forward. As feedback only focuses on what's happened and we can only change the future. Hence, the feed forward is crucial, as that way we focus on what's possible moving forward. So again, just a slight twist on the words, but you can really see how it makes a massive difference, not only on how you take that criticism or that, that insight, that feedback, but how you use it to go forward in the future.
Well, I've been doing some public speaking seminars and keynote speeches associated with this book. And we do feed forward. In fact, Marshall's really an expert at it. We do feed forward, where in the audience, we encourage everyone to move from feedback to feed forward. And it's so energizing, right? We do this exercise where we ask people to talk about what they want to accomplish, and then the person besides them has to give them feed forward to help them accomplish that goal. It's all forward looking, all forward looking. Yeah. The energy is so positive. It's all about being helpful, while the energy around feedback typically is very judgmental.
Yeah.
So you can use language to change the judgmental nature, or you can reframe and call it feed forward, which is all about looking forward, and people just want to hear it.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. And then finally, in the freestyle section, you focus in on designing, creating, innovating you, the reader, the listener as a person. And in this chapter, Design Your Passion, you write about the fact that as the world changes around us, so do we as individuals, and therefore we need to grow and change with it. You mentioned in this chapter that finding your passion is very much a fixed approach to your career, and that instead we need to design our passion in order to adopt a more of a growth mindset. Again, can you talk us through what you mean here?
Sure. I love this topic, actually. It's something I'm passionate about. So, when I do the speaking, inevitably somebody comes up to me afterwards, or even sometimes they raise their hand and they talk about their kids. In fact, one of the interesting things about the book is it's really helped a lot of not just young people, but also older audiences, people our age and even older, who are who find the lessons in this book very attractive because it's not written directed at them. It's written directed at a younger audience. So they feel they don't get defensive at all. They can pick and choose the things they like, I've noticed. And that's one of the reasons why I think this book has resonated. And I see this in some of the speaking that I do. And this particular lesson talks about how you move from ready-made purpose in your early career to self-made purpose in your later career. And a lot of parents, I think, particularly like the book because they really start thinking their job is to help their kids find purpose, because they've been told so often that the way you make choices in a world that's changing so much is you have a long-term defined purpose, and therefore it'll be easier to make your choices. But the reality is most young people just aren't at the stage of their life yet where they're going to have self-made purpose. They're going to have ready-made purpose, which basically means ready-made purpose means it's given to you by your parents, by your employer, by your school, by your social network. It's something which you haven't really developed on your own. Now, there's some young people, a good example I like to use is Greta Thunberg, right? In Sweden. She already knows that she's trying to address climate change, and this is her potentially even lifelong purpose. But most young people are not Greta Thunberg in their clarity. They have many different interests, and they're trying to discover what their purpose is. And they reach the point in their life, and it happens for people at different points. It happened very late for me to be able to have that movement from ready-made purpose to self-made purpose. Yeah. And there's a wonderful illustration in the book. The illustrator of the book is Asheesh Advani. She's this amazing industrial designer, and she's written her own books, and her illustrations are really beautiful, and she has this wonderful design for how you actually do design the life you love by moving from ready-made purpose to self-made purpose and having midlife in the middle. I just use it because particularly in a world which this much change, you kind of have to deconstruct your life before you can reconstruct it to be able to reach that point of self-made purpose.
No, totally. And I think it's about, not waiting for that passion to land in your lap, I think you say in the book. Otherwise, you might not take that job, career, experience. Having that open mind, understanding that you can learn to be passionate about something over time. In fact, I think I was watching, while I was reading your book over the summer, I was watching the Olympics. And one of the keys was around, valuing and embracing the process over the end results. And a great example to this was, I don't know whether you know Adam Peaty. He's a British breaststroke swimmer, but he's competed in 3 Olympic Games. Third one was Paris this summer. He's won gold in the 100-meter breaststroke at the 2016 Olympics and then retained it in 2020 or 2021 when it happened after COVID. Multiple world records, 8-time world champion, always chasing this higher goal, but he never enjoyed the ride. So in 2023, he stepped away from swimming. He was not happy, facing mental health pressures and demons. But he redesigned his passion, and he came back to Paris, and he won silver. He didn't win gold, and everyone was talking about, yeah, this would be amazing if he won gold. And I remember in his speech, he was saying, this medal means the most to me. It doesn't matter what time I got today, because in my heart I've already won. And he'd learned to design his passion, and he'd learned to fall in love with the process again. And I think there's even talk of whether he'll come back, and he'll come back. I think it's LA the next one, isn't it? So that again, stories really bring it to life on how it really impacts people.
I love that example. I really do. In fact, most people, I would say, who achieve a goal, they realize upon achieving the goal, the happiness came from the journey and the process, not from the achieving of the goal.
Yeah.
So with the benefit of hindsight, if you know that's true in most cases, you really should lean into the process and the journey, and that increases the likelihood of actually getting, at the end, what you actually want from the whole experience.
Yeah.
But you don't really know that until you have the benefit of experience in hindsight.
Yeah, absolutely. This book is for that reason, therefore, then, Asheesh. So we've talked a lot about young people, and they are the future, and this book is one that can definitely help guide them in this new world we're living in. We've covered a lot of examples today, but what one piece of advice would you give to our younger listeners about goal setting and making career decisions?
Well, as I said, one of my favorite lessons in the book is to make friends 5 to 10 years older than you, or younger than you, depending on where you are in your career. And I'm going to lean in on that one because it's so practical. And I think it ties to also building great mentorship relationships. It also ties to being a good mentee. Being a good mentee is, of course, a two-way street, and not being afraid to ask. But if I could leave everyone with just one piece of advice, in a world with 20 careers, 7 jobs at least, this much change, you're probably going to have some involuntary transitions over the course of your life. You're going to get fired a couple of times. Yeah. That's something which people of our generation probably, and you're younger than me, so I keep saying that, and hopefully not inadvertently insulting you. But
I'm not sure, by the way.
But people of our generation really, I think, felt some social stigma about that. But I think the world has changed so much that we've come to embrace that there are going to be a lot of transitions in our life. So knowing that is true, you're going to have the resilience. One of my favorite quotes in the book is, life is moving from mess to mess with no loss of confidence. So you're going to have to embrace that way of thinking, and young people are going to, I think, are already gravitating to it.
Yeah.
But making sure that you actually build your network 5 to 10 years older than you, thinking of them as role models, mentors, and people you can learn from, is probably one of the most concrete pieces of advice in the book that I want people to take away.
Yeah. And I think there's another piece of advice which this book is very good at, learning and creating these good habits early on when you're young. Otherwise, you'll spend a long time trying to fix those bad habits as you move through life. This actual podcast is sponsored by B2B Frameworks. And on the B2B Frameworks website, there's 100 different frameworks to help every aspect of business, from strategy and marketing through to brand and innovation. We should put the Fixed Flexible Freestyle Business Framework on there. But to put that to one side, what's your favorite business framework and why?
Oh, I love Business Model Canvas. Alexander Osterwalder, who's also in the book, and Alexander is this amazing creator of this framework with Yves Pinnier, and I've used it many times to deconstruct business models. And I know it's called a Business Model Canvas, but you can use it for really any process or model to make sure you understand who the partners are, who the suppliers are, what the economics of it are. And I've been teaching a class in entrepreneurship, and we use it in that. So that's one of my favorite frameworks.
Yeah, I agree. And I've used it many times in workshops and projects when delivering back findings from research projects. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. To conclude, I'd like to enter the quick fire round of questions. So we're talking about a book. I love books. What are you reading at the moment?
So Aisha Bursell, the illustrator of the book, has written a book called Design the Life You Love. And it is such a great book. We're actually doing a session on it next week. So I'm fully immersed in that book right now.
Right. Well, I haven't read that one. She pops up a lot in your book, and she's got many talents as well with the drawing as well, and the illustration. So I'll definitely have to search that one out. What about the best business book, apart from your own, Asheesh, that you recommend our listeners should read?
Well, one that was influential to me really early in my life, it's been around for a long time. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book because it basically shows that by adding more ambition, more zeros, a bigger vision to whatever you're doing actually takes the same amount of effort as the smaller vision with the fewer zeros. So you may as well, if you really want to help the world, you really want to create more abundance, you can actually just be a little bit more ambitious or maybe a lot more ambitious and actually not change the way you spend your time at all.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
I think I'll turn to Marshall's great advice about when you receive feedback, just say thank you.
Yeah. Well, we've covered that today, and I'm sure you could have lent on any number of numerous advice that Marshall's given over the time of mentoring. So I thought he may crop up there. Which business leader do you most admire and why?
Satya Nadella of Microsoft runs a very large, complicated business, and he manages expectations of all stakeholders very well in a very complex world. So I would pick him mainly because I think he has a very difficult job, which he's managed to do quite well.
And I think for that reason and how he's turned Microsoft around, he's popped up a few times when I've asked that question to my guests. So, finally, who would you like me to reach out to and invite? Who do you like to hear on this podcast in the future, Asheesh?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. The fact that you haven't had Aisha Bursell on with Design the Life You Love, and she has another book called Design the Long Life You Love, I've got a feeling that your listeners will really enjoy listening to her. She truly is one of the world's great business thinkers, and I'm happy to introduce you to her if you don't know her already.
Well, I would appreciate that, and I definitely would. She crops up in this book with lots of different advice as well. So I will. I'll wait for that introduction. I'll reach out to her, and there you go, listeners. That's one for the future. I want to thank you so much for writing this book. I would recommend the listeners go out and buy this book for two reasons. Firstly, it's bursting with so many real life examples. We brought some of those to the table today of how leaders, experts in the field, the youth of today have faced challenges, embraced opportunities, and achieved their dreams. So it's inspiring and engaging in equal measures. And secondly, it's just great to have on your desk at work or school. It's a playbook. It's not linear in that you don't need to read it cover to cover. Therefore, you can pick it up, flip it open. Anywhere you'll find one valuable leadership lesson after the another. And there's always an associated story to go with it. So it really does bring it to life. And actually, a third reason maybe to buy it is that all net proceeds from book sales are donated to JA Worldwide, so you can personally fund the great work that Asheesh and his team are doing. So there you go, three reasons to purchase this book. So thanks again for your time, Asheesh. Hopefully our paths will cross again in the future. If anyone does have any questions or, what the book, is there anywhere that we can point them to?
Sure. So the book's website is modernachievement.com. We also have a way to share your story. So if you have an achievement story of your own or a lesson you want to share, we've created a way to do that. And the website for my organization is jaworldwide.org.
Fabulous. Well, please, listeners, do follow both of those links and buy the book. Learn more about JA Worldwide, and for you young listeners out there, definitely take up on this opportunity to educate yourself and to improve yourself for the future. Thanks again, Asheesh.
Thank you. This was great.
This podcast has been brought to you in partnership with Awards International. Awards International is dedicated to running successful business awards programs and conferences. Founded in 2008 by Don Hales and Neil Skihel, the company's core mission centers on honoring and celebrating exceptional achievements in customer and employee experience, but also in overall business excellence across diverse sectors. In addition, their aim is to showcase best practices, innovations, and achievements that contribute positively to these areas, ultimately inspiring other organizations to improve their own customer experience, employee engagement strategies, and overall business success. To find out more about Awards International and how to register your interest in their awards programs, check their website www.awardsinternational.com.